So people, we have with us Ms. Kunashni Parekh. She's a sports psychologist and mental health professional, passionate about bridging the mental health awareness gap in India and providing mental health care services with an integrated neuroscience. She, uh, she has approach to counseling and intervention, and she has experienced research from the University of British Columbia, Canada, and has a clinical practice experience from JJ Hospital, Mumbai. She also was a goalkeeper and vice captain in the football under 16. We are really glad to have you, ma'am. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here and talk about this, especially on World Mental Health Day, which is a great day to talk about the awareness of mental health and discuss all these issues.
Yeah, so let's begin. So, can you please give us a brief introduction about what neuroscience is and what exactly it focuses upon? Yeah.
Sure. So we all know when we study about the brain, about mental health, we study the field of psychology. And psychology is the study of human behavior. So we look at our thoughts, our emotions, and how this all affects our eventual performance and our behavior. Now, neuroscience is going into the biological aspect of all these things. So it's looking at how our brain functions at a much deeper level, at the molecular level, at a cellular level, and understanding what all is going on here, how is that eventually affecting our thoughts, our emotions, and our behaviors. So neuroscience is the study of the brain and how it affects behavior. So studying the brain and behavior relationship. So that basically is neuroscience. And then what researchers have done in the field of neuroscience is they've studied different parts of the brain and they've tried to identify, okay, now this part of the brain is kind of responsible for this behavioral output, or that part of the brain controls this. So once we identify what brain region is linked to what kind of behavior, then we can work and enhance that particular region. So that is what neuroscience researchers look at. Yeah. The tools and the techniques and methods they have are neuroimaging, so that's fMRI studies. You have EEG studies where you go into a scanner or you put some electrodes on your head and you record electrical activity. So there are different ways to identify what's going on here. And there's a whole lot of research and case studies that we hopefully can discuss today and get a more deeper understanding. But yes, this is basically what neuroscience is, understanding what's going on here, how it's affecting that, and also on the flip side, how everything that we do, whatever psychology techniques or therapy what we do, or any kind of physical exercise or anything, how that also changes our brain. So that's also studied in neuroscience. So these are the two aspects of it.
So how does actually neuroscience or the structures and functions in the brain affect our behavior?
So the structures and functions of the brain, you might have heard there are two types of cells. There are two types of areas in the brain. There's gray matter and there's white matter, right? So how this affects our performance is the strength of the structure of these different cellular components and the functionality of these components. So at a very small potential, let's look at the one cell, one neuron cell. If you look at one cell, all cells are connected by means of synapses, right? One cell connects to another and they release neurotransmitters to talk to each other. Now, within that cell, to communicate to the next cell, there's some response called an action potential. So if I want to talk to the next cell, pass on a message, some thought, some idea, some image, all cells are coming together. The translation of information happens in an action potential. So how at a very molecular level this affects behavior is the strength of an action potential. Stronger the action potential, stronger that behavioral output. So if your action potential is faster, and this is shown by your membrane lining. If your membrane lining is thicker, stronger, there's more myelin sheath, you have a faster action potential. And then your behavior is faster. So memory, how do we learn things, right? When we learn some kind of information, say a new chapter you're studying, first you know nothing about that chapter, there's no information there, but you read it again and again and again. And then those words keep going on in your mind, that information clicks, and those neural connections become stronger and stronger. So it's the strength between those connections that eventually leads to behavior and learning.
Okay, so then how are our emotions related to the neuroscience? I mean, what specific structures of the brain focus upon the emotional part of our behavior?
So emotion is tied to this whole system in our brain called the limbic system. The limbic system is found right below the cortex and is made up of multiple different parts. One of the most prominent part is called the amygdala. So that's AMYGDALA, the amygdala. So what this brain structure does, that any kind of emotion you feel, and mostly the fear emotion, the fight and fight response, that imagine
Right.
you're in a jungle, you see a bear, you suddenly get like scared, right? So that response in your brain, the activation happens in the amygdala. So this is the region responsible for most of our emotional processing. So to answer your question, it's not just one area, it's all the brain connected. So I know initially I said, one area of the brain controls this behavior,
Yeah.
next controls the other. It's actually all connected. So another area of the brain has information about what a bear is, right? Another information has ki bear is not good for me, bear will eat me. And then the amygdala has that emotional link that, oh, I have to run away. If I can't run away, what will happen? Fear. So it's like, your
Yeah.
planning, your decision making, all these different areas connecting finally to lead to that emotion. Emotions don't just happen just like that, right? There's some kind of thought, some kind of reaction to that, to which we have an emotion. So mainly the focus is the amygdala. And we see in cases where people have a lot of anxiety or they suffer from PTSD, which is post traumatic stress
Right.
disorder. In this, it's the hyperactivation of the amygdala which is there. So that is
Okay.
implicated in such cases.
So, what are the biological aspect of mental illness? I mean, how does the brain network and the connections control the well-being? And if they are not working properly or not working effectively, how do they result in biological or psychological disorders?
Right. So, firstly, there's a very strong genetic link also to all mental illnesses. And you see that in twin studies also. People who are more
Yeah.
biologically related, they are more concordance rate in that. They also get illness. If someone in your family has it, there's a higher chance you might also get it. So our genes are already there. So one is at the gene level. The second
Right.
is at the neurotransmitter level. So now neurotransmitters is the chemical messenger between your neurons by which they talk. So if there's
Hmm.
something wrong in that messenger level, if I can't communicate to the next neuron, that will also show an effect, right? And the third level is at a tissue level. So your whole cortical area, say just one big chunk of your brain. So say the motor cortex or the sensory cortex, which is responsible for feeling sensation or being able to move your muscles. If there's damage to this area, then that behavior is affected. And we see this when people suffer from an accident or a stroke.
Okay.
Say there's loss of blood supply to one area of the brain. That whole tissue area is damaged. You're not able to move a particular muscle. You're not able to remember certain things. So memory also can get affected. You might get amnesia. So this is how the brain exactly leads to behavior. And how it leads to mental well-being? Well, the stronger your neural connections in certain
Right.
areas of the brain, the stronger is your behavioral output in whatever you want. Say you want to, let's talk about something that everybody wants. Everybody wants to be at peace, right? Everyone wants to feel calm and happy, right? Nobody wants to so much
Right.
tension and stress. So now how do you achieve that? Yes, we have all these techniques to achieve that. We have meditation, we have, journaling, we have our therapy and different things, exercise also. But now once you do all these things, how does it reflect in the brain? And this happens in um, let's take one example. For example, you want to be calm, right? You want to be stress free, you don't want all these things, you want to be at peace. So how does this happen? When this doesn't happen, your brain is constantly running. It's jumping from one thought to another. You're
Yeah.
thinking about this, you're thinking about that. Are exam dena hai? I have to pass, I have to finish my studies, I have to help mom in the kitchen. There's so many things running in your head. I have to call my friend back. If I don't call her, what will she think? La 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 la. So many things going on. So your brain is hyperactive, overactive, and this is responsible in a network called the default mode network. So this network is always active in your brain. Now, through all the practices I talked to you, which is the mindfulness, the meditation, the therapy, all the different things, this helps you control the hyperactivation in all these areas. Main area being the prefrontal cortex. I know I'm giving a lot of neuroscience words out there, but I'm giving you the exact location
Yeah.
point where researchers have attached this to the behavior. So prefrontal cortex is front region of the brain where all our thinking happens, our planning happens, all our decision making happens. And this area, if it's hyperactive, you will constantly be under stress. You'll constantly second guessing yourself. Oh, did I do this? Did I do that? Oh, should I do it again? Oh, was there a better way to do it? Now, if you
Yeah.
allow the neurons to relax, allow them to just, function at a pace that they are functioning with, then you won't have burnout. Burnout, mental burnout,
Yeah.
and also physical burnout in the brain of your cells, right?
Yeah.
So this is one, way to make sure that, you feel calm, you feel at peace. Your neural connections have to be functioning at a smooth and comfortable pace. Otherwise, you literally, like, how wire we have, right? If you
Yeah.
constantly stimulate the wire burns, jal jata hai. So similarly, your brain, your neurons will burn out, right? And then you
Yeah.
need constant, like, you need to relax and you need to take a break. So you have to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Okay, so there are some psychological disorders that are related to the biological aspect, and they say that certain chemicals, as you highlighted, the disbalance among them leads to disorders. So, could you please tell us about some of those disorders and what dysfunction leads to these disorders?
Sure. So let's talk about depression, a very
Yeah.
commonly understood mental illness. So depression में क्या होता है? Depression, as you must be knowing the symptoms, and I'll say it again for the viewers. Depression is a condition where you feel a very low mood for most part of the day, and for
Yeah.
most days of the week. Not just like, one day you feel sad and the next moment you're happy. No, it's a very constant, low emotion. There's anhedonia, means you don't feel like doing anything. There's a lot of guilt. There's lack of concentration. Your weight goes up and down. Your sleep schedules go, and you might also have suicidal thoughts. So again, depression is a very
Right.
serious mental illness condition. Now, what they have found is that if you give people who are depressed a certain kind of drug called an SSRI. This is one drug that we give to as medicine for depression. Then they are shown
Okay.
to improve in their symptoms. That anhedonia, that low mood is supposed to improve. So what does this SSRI do? The SSRI, it attacks one chemical in the brain called serotonin, and it increases the level of serotonin in the brain. So that's how serotonin has been linked to depression. And nobody knows serotonin is linked to depression. By the way of testing all these chemicals and drugs, increasing and decreasing certain levels, they found, okay, this works, okay, that means serotonin is responsible. So actually we
Yeah.
don't know the cause of different things, but because of trial and error with different drugs, the research industry is trying to work. So how does it work exactly? Since you mentioned the drugs and neurotransmitters,
Yeah.
what it does, the SSRI drug, um, when you're depressed, when you don't feel good, the connection between your neurons, it lessens. The serotonin, which I was talking, that chemical messenger, your cells kind of eat it up. It doesn't let it pass on to the next cell. So this drug, it comes in, right, and it blocks those other chemicals which are stopping your cells from absorbing that serotonin, and it allows your
Yeah.
cells to take that serotonin. So SSRI is selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. So it allows it to be absorbed by the cell. So this is how serotonin is linked to depression. There's also dopamine, which we hear about a lot.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm happy, so my dopamine is great. But that's actually a misconception. It's not like I'm happy, so I have dopamine, right? There's no one chemical that's been tied to happiness so far. But dopamine does help in rewards and motivation and getting that kind of pleasure, pleasure seeking motivation. So you like something, it's that thing that's causing that pleasure, but because you represent that thing as something that you like, dopamine is released as a messenger that, hey, that's something that your body likes, go for that again. So the chips packet, Lay's packet, we like eating it, right?
Yeah.
Then our brain thinks, yeah, even you must be eating it, munching whenever you feel like.
Yeah.
So whenever you have something that you like, or you watch some movie, or you like someone, you find someone attractive, your brain says, hey, that's something I want, and then that dopamine is released. Dopamine is also implicated in motor movement. So when you have dopamine is required to for your brain to signal to your hand, now move your hand, or now stop. I can say I want to lift my hand, right? But if something's wrong with my dopamine system, even if I try to lift my hand, it's not going to go. Or without control, I'll keep shaking. So this happens in
Yeah.
Parkinson's disease. In Parkinson's patients, they have a lot
Yeah.
of movement problems, right? And this is where the dopamine is very less. On the other hand, we see that in cases of schizophrenia, when people have
Yeah.
hallucinations, delusions, they're out of touch with reality. They see things in front of them that are not actually there, or they hear things that are not there. This is when one hypothesis is that the dopamine is very high. Again, we know this because drugs which reduce dopamine have been also reducing the symptoms. That's why we know that. So when dopamine is super high, they think that that's the cause of all these hallucinations and all these delusions. And another thing about dopamine is that Um, I forgot my other point about schizophrenia, but I think that covers these two neurotransmitters, serotonin and dopamine, which are the most popular ones. There's also a lot of endorphins that are released in the brain. So again,
Yeah.
linking this to mental well-being. Again, mental health, bola to we should not just talk about mental illness. It's general mental health also. So how you want to
Yeah.
feel better, you want to feel more positive, you want to go out. So how does that come in? How does that help? For example, you go for a run, you exercise. You feel good, right? After you exercise, after you go for a
Yeah.
run. Why is that? What's happening in the brain? Now there are these endorphins coming out that make you feel good. Endorphins are also released when you eat chocolate. So chocolate also makes you feel good. Sometimes, on period, girls love eating chocolate because that also reduces the pain in your body. So endorphin gives you that high. It reduces that pain. Not like chocolate gives you a high, but it's the
Yeah.
same chemical
Same.
that leads to that kind of reaction. So endorphins are another neurotransmitter that lead to different behavioral outputs. So you have again like the genes, the neurotransmitters, the tissues, all affecting your behavior in some way or the other.
Yeah. So you said that therapy helps changes in the structures and the functions of the brain. So how does therapy actually helps in the changes in the structures and functions?
Right. So that's a good question, right? Like, how does what we do affect our brain? So
Yeah.
when I say, our brain is responsible for this and this structure is responsible for that, now people start thinking, अरे मेरा brain ही ऐसा है, I can't do anything, I can't change. Like, मेरे chemical में ही problem है, brain chemical में ही problem, and people just stop at that. But the thing about the brain is that even though there's a biological basis for this behavior, that does not mean that that's the cause of the behavior. The biology in
Yeah.
your brain is not the cause of the behavior, it's a reflection of the behavior. So your behavior changes, that brain chemistry will also change. So it's not causing it, it's just a correlation going up and down. And this is called neuroplasticity of the brain. It means that what
Oh,
you're born with, you're not just stuck there, right? You have the capacity to change those neural
build new.
connections. You have the power to modulate. Exactly, yeah. So how does therapy change the brain? Now let's take CBT for example. CBT is cognitive behavioral therapy. Let's take the cognitive
Yeah.
part of it. So what happens in CBT? There's a lot of cognitive restructuring. So say you have a fallacy in thinking, such as I'm not good enough. Now you fail one math exam and you think I'm not good enough. Now what have you done? You've done a generalization, right?
Yeah.
One subject you're not good in, you think you're a bad student, you're a bad daughter, you're a bad human being, you don't deserve anything in life, right? I mean, this sounds funny, but people actually suffer from this kind of thinking pattern.
No. Yeah.
So now it's a thought, right? And thought is represented in some kind of neural connection. Now, through cognitive restructuring, when you challenge that thought, when you challenge that with facts and saying, hey, but how was your marks in English? How was your marks in
Yeah.
Hindi? Or what is your achievement outside the school? Or what does your friends and family have to say? And you start thinking like that, you bring in different information which is stored in a different part of your brain, same area but different neural connections. And now
Yeah.
by shifting your attention to that in therapy, shifting your focus to that, you're strengthening those neurons. So now your default pattern of thinking, because of that practice, will shift to that neural system that no, I am good enough. So anything that you do, whether it's like learning how to juggle or learning how to ride a bicycle or learning how to think differently, like I'm strong versus I'm weak, you have the power to change your thoughts. If you change your thoughts, these thoughts are reflected in your neural patterns. So your neurons will also change. When it comes to cycling, when people learn cycling or people learn the piano, when they start learning the piano, your brain is a certain brain A. After
Yeah.
some time, you see changes in the brain. You see a high increase of gray matter volume. You see stronger functioning networks in areas of the brain that represent music and auditory learning and fine motor movement. So brain region which is responsible for fine motor movement, if you keep practicing playing the piano or fine work, painting, art, then that brain structure gets changed. So that's how therapy changes the brain, or any kind of behavior we do changes the brain. What you do has the power to change what's there. It's not like jo hai वैसा ही है. That's why
Yeah.
the brain is plastic. It's malleable. It's changeable, and that's why there's hope in therapy and everything. Like you have the power to change yourself, change your brain that's inside there. You're not stuck with one brain. Our brain is not something that we come out of. It's something that we control. So
Yeah. So
that's how
So
it affects the
basically,
brain.
neuroplasticity makes new neural connections within the brain, and then they ultimately affect the brain functions, and then we produce or we engage in good activities or a better performance, right?
Exactly, making new connections, different connections. That's neuroplasticity.
Okay, so how can we build on our resilience due through these brain structures or functions or through neuroplasticity?
So,
Resilience.
right. So neuroplasticity just means that your brain is able to change. It
Yeah,
is capable of change. It is plastic. It is malleable. Plastic means moldable, can be molded.
yeah,
Now, how do you enhance resilience? Now, psychology will help in that, right? Psychology, all our tools, all our techniques, all our tips, whether it's through therapy, whether it's through journaling, whether it's gratitude, meditation, psychotherapy, psychodrama, art therapy, or it's just jogging, whatever kind of tools and tips you're using to enhance your resilience, enhance your mental well being, that will reflect in your brain structure. On the other hand, if you
right.
talk about mental illness specifically, now you see there's some behavioral change in a person, but you don't know why that's happening. Now you can do a scan, you can do something, you can and see an image of the brain, then you get a clearer picture. Oh, it's in this area. Say for example the auditory cortex. Okay, that means that something is wrong in this area of the brain. So as a neuropsychologist or a neurologist, you'll understand the pattern, and someone who suffers from head injury or stroke will be able
Yeah.
to help them better. Yeah,
So,
so that's how the brain affects.
so
That's how we
that is
develop resilience.
okay. So well-being subject we relate subjective well-being to happiness. So you talked about that endorphins increases the high and then you feel happy. So how does that relates to the subjective well-being? I mean, subjective well-being equals to happiness.
Right. So subjective well-being and happiness, I would actually say, are two different things. So happiness is an emotion, right? You
Yeah,
feel it at one particular point of time. You eat a good meal, you feel happy. Some of your
feel
favorite
happy.
food, feel happy. But right after that, you might feel sad. So you experience happiness, but your general well-being might not be great. So you
Yeah,
have that capacity to experience happiness. Your emotional system is working fine. Your amygdala is good and everything is good. But now when it comes to mental well-being in general, there are three components, right? There's cognitive and there's emotional also. And finally
yeah,
the behavioral output that leads to that. So how does mental well-being reflect with the endorphins in the brain? So mental well-being has to be enhanced from all different angles, right? There's not one area in the brain that, okay, I'll work on my hippocampus, I'll work on my amygdala, I'll get well-being. It doesn't work like that. It's enhancing your
yeah,
lifestyle, having a good diet, having good physical exercise, having healthy relationships, good communication, all these things that we do, right? And doing behaviors that you enjoy, which will release endorphins. But it doesn't mean that doing one behavior that releases one series of endorphins will make
yeah,
you happy or will make you give you that subjective well-being. So I would rather say that the endorphins which increase your happiness, which eventually increase your mental well-being, has to be sequential and periodic over time. If you keep stimulating your brain in a way that keeps you happy in different kinds of
yeah.
ways, then you'll have a general sense of happiness. But it's very important to differentiate momentary emotional experience of happiness and developing your overall general well-being.
Right. So I had a doubt. So neuroscience basically says that everything is connected to biological.
Yeah,
So is that every behavior? So we discussed that CBT works. So we take into account the cognitions and then their impact is seen in the behavior. So why is always the biological part considered? I mean, the societal parts can also influence. So how do neuroscience come part with the social or the psychological part of
right.
well-being?
So, neuroscience is just a reflection of what is going on mentally, right? Neuroscience is
Okay.
the biological base. Your thoughts,
Yeah.
your actions, everything is happening at the mental level. So,
Yeah.
everything that we do, all our therapy and all, happens at that mental level, and then that is being reflected in the physical body. Now, let's understand the relationship between the physical body and the mental body, right?
Yeah.
The physical body has all these neurotransmitters, all these genes, all these chemicals, changing the
Right.
physical body, like say hitting the brain hard or messing up the chemicals, will affect your emotions, will affect your cognitions, right? In
Right.
this way. Neuroscience says,
Hmm.
hey, this neurotransmitter is not good, that's why your behavior is like that,
Yeah.
right? But now, from a psychology perspective, it's like, hey, it's not the neurotransmitters that's the problem. It's just my thinking pattern is the problem. So if I change my
Yeah.
thinking pattern or my societal stress, my environmental stress, say, some relationship problem or, someone has passed away in my family, that problem is the reason for my illness, reason for my low mood. And that's absolutely correct. There's the environment that comes in, there's your own
Yeah.
personality that comes in, your thinking pattern. And these again lead to your emotions and actions, which reflects in a change in the brain. So, like we discussed earlier, it's not that your brain controls your behavior, but
Yeah.
your brain and behavior work in tangent. Your behavior changes, your brain will change. Your brain changes, your behavior will change. So we can't control our biology, right? We can't go and put
Yeah.
some chemical there or do some surgery. No. But we can control our behaviors, control our thinking pattern, which will then go and reflect our brain chemistry. So that's what neuroscience says, that everything's connected, but that doesn't mean that it's determined. You have the power to influence
Exactly.
that, change that.
So, how do in daily life we can apply the applications or principles of the neuroplasticity? So, I understood that I need to change this behavior, and I got a strategy also. So, how should I eventually work for that so that I get into that habit and my behavior is altered?
So I think firstly, psychoeducation, understanding
Yeah,
neuroscience, understanding the brain. If you have basic knowledge about how our brain works, that I have this area in my brain, which is the amygdala, this area, which is my prefrontal cortex, then you know that, by doing this behavior, say by going for CBT or
yeah,
by journaling or doing, mandala drawing or something, if you know that this is affecting my prefrontal cortex or this is affecting this area in the brain, you will be more motivated to do it. So how I
yeah,
think at a more one-on-one general level, how neuroscience can help is like if you understand what is this going to do to your brain, you'll be like, okay, I want to change it. I want to do something differently. So at a very common man level, this is how neuroscience can help just by being aware. Another point to be aware of is that your brain is made up 75% of water.
yeah,
So, if you don't drink water the whole day, if you don't keep yourself hydrated, not just your body gets dehydrated, your brain also gets dehydrated. And then you can't function. It leads to headache, it leads to stress, it leads to anxiety. So, just by knowing this fact about the brain that's been studied in neuroscience, you will change your behavior. So,
yeah,
being aware about all these changes that happen in the brain. Another fact is that our brain is just 2% of our whole body weight. You must have seen pictures of the brain, it's very light, right?
yeah,
But it uses 20% of our oxygen needs. It consumes a lot of energy. So if you're overthinking, if you're constantly stressing out, you are draining your energy, your fuel, which you eat food. You'll need to eat more food or you'll feel drained out. You might not have done any physical activity. You might be sitting in one place. But just by thinking too much and exhausting that neural connections again and again, you will feel completely exhausted. So again, by knowing this information about the brain, it'll help you like engaging in all different kinds of behaviors.
So you talked about overthinking. So what strategies we can take to reduce the overthinking so that our energy is not gone in thinking only and we do something fruitful or thing that we need to focus, because overthinking does not lead to a particular result. We keep on thinking and we end up doing nothing. So
Exactly. So one thing about overthinking is that when you have a problem in front of you, for
yeah,
example, whether you should go to your friend's party or not, right? Should you go? Okay, I have to study. No, I won't get marks. I won't get this. My friend, what are my friends? This is so many things, right? For one decision, you're spending next 5 hours deciding whether to overthink on this, what to do on this or not. So one thing is do is write everything down. Write all your points. Okay. Make a decision. Considering all those points, make a decision. And after that's done, any thought you have, go back to that
yeah,
list and say, have I already considered this? If I considered it, discard it. Right? So you're practicing negating information that you've already gone over. So overthinking means that same thing you're going again and again repeating, not knowing that you've
yeah,
already discussed this. Exactly. So once you have a decision, go back to that list and say, ye to already soch liya. Okay, sorry, it's over, it's done. Now to make this practice more easier, to enhance your focus, your concentration, and your general awareness about yourself and decisions you need to make, one practice that very effective is meditation, because this clears your mind. When you have clear mind, when you have clarity of thought, then your decision making and your processing becomes faster. So you won't
Yeah.
overthink because the exact thought that comes, you know how to handle it, and that's sorted. So that's one practice you can use, and also writing things down. Another thing you can do is, say you're walking from your home to school, or wherever you're walking, from home to tuition or home to class. So right now we're all stuck at home. So let's say from your home to your bedroom to your kitchen. So when you
Yeah.
go in this distance, say you have a 5 minute break, just note down all the thoughts that come to your head. Okay, note down all the thoughts that come to your head. Do this just for one day. You don't have to do this every day. Do it one day, and after those five
Yeah.
minutes are over, read everything you wrote and say, did any of these thoughts help me in any way? Like, have I made any progress with this? Then next time you go for a walk, you'll not think, because you know that that didn't
Yeah.
really help. So you can try that.
It was an amazing tip. I mean, I really think that will work. So one last question I have, that how does taking breaks that definitely helps our functioning of the brain. So how does that help in the neuro? Are there any chemical transmitters changes happening when we take a break or something?
So, just like your body needs rest, your brain also
Yeah.
needs rest, right?
Yeah.
Now, I'll give you the example of your muscle. You want to build your muscle, so you'll start doing push-ups. So you
Yeah.
can do gradually 10 push-ups a day, next day 15, next day 20, and build it up gradually. Now, but if the and between those days, you're giving that body, that muscle, that rest to recuperate, to build that muscle by eating protein, by just allowing your body to rest. Same thing happens with the brain. If you study, say for 1 hour every day,
Yeah.
right, and then you allow yourself to take rest, that information is going to be absorbed much better than if you have a cramming session that goes on for 4 5 hours. When you
Right.
study intensely for 4 5 hours or practice something for 5 hours, the output that you have at the end of those 5 hours is very less compared to if you spread that out over time. And why does this happen? It happens because the mechanism of learning and memory is such. Once you learn something, for it to get stored in your memory in a very solid form, in that biological basis that we were talking about, it takes time.
Yeah.
Right? It's not like information dala, okay, now I know it. You must also experience this, right? Like if you study over 2 days, you learn it better than if you study fast in 5 hours, you don't remember anything. So this
Yeah.
is called
True.
long-term potentiation. And that's why rest is important, because rest enhances your memory of your cells to remember information better. And that wire we talked about, wire, frying
Yeah.
because of overstimulation, that wire won't fry, your cells won't fry because you're allowing it that rest. So one is that physical rest of those neurons, and second, the molecules that are involved in the memory process. So allowing your cells to rejuvenate, to relax, to release all those toxins and solidify your information will help in rest at a neuromolecular level.
That was great. I mean, how can taking breaks and ultimately increase your memory? So yeah, it was really
I can
interesting.
explain that even more in detail, but I think that'll go too much into the
Yeah.
chemical and molecular aspect. But just
And
remember that breaks are important. Yeah.
so also, if we take breaks, we can develop those new wires like that. If I study for this much time, then I'll take a break, then I'll study. So that wire gets connected, and I mean, increasing our productivity and memory again. So
Exactly. Just
yeah.
like building that muscle. Like, if you try to do 20 push-ups at one time, you will break
Yeah.
that muscle.
Yeah.
So it's same with the brain. If you
Definitely.
study so much, there's no time for it to get absorbed in those molecules. Like memory is stored how? In a chemical form, right? So
Right.
allow that to form, allow those molecules to form. Otherwise, the memory will just disappear, and you will not remember in the exam में क्या लिखना था.
Yeah. So thank you so much, ma'am. It was really, really very informative and amazing. And thank you so much for collaborating with us on this World Mental Health Day. We are really glad that you did so. And we're really looking forward for more collaborations with you. Yeah.
Most
Thank you
welcome,
so
most
much.
welcome. Super happy. All
Thank
the best.
you.
Take care. You guys also are doing great work, so keep it up.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, take care.